Your jacket pocket.
All right. Thank you all for having me here. It's a great honor to be with you, and
you would like to hear.
yeah, it's a great honor to be with you and present my work. Right, I'm a PhD candidate, and I work with Dr. Hiago Hill. He's right there. I'm almost close to be done with my PhD, hopefully. Definitely, yes.
One way or the other.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
It's a little slower than I. There we go.
All right, so today I will be speaking about the role that New England plays in the global battle against a disease called wheat stem rust. So as I go through my presentation, first of all, for those of you who doesn't know what stem rust is, I'll introduce the disease, and then I'll give you the historical significance of this disease in North America and give you the global context. And then I'll shift my focus to the life cycle of the wheat stem rust, which involves the plant called the wheat, and another plant called Barbary, and then I'll focus my attention towards the New England and what it means for New England to have this disease. So stem rust, also called as a black rust, is one of the oldest and most feared disease in human history. It is caused by a pathogen, fungal pathogen called Puccinia graminis, and this is a typical picture of stem rust infecting wheat crops. So it can infect crops like wheat, barley, rye, oats, and some other cereal crops. And this is called a rust in the first place because of this rusty powder that appears as a symptom of this disease. And here's a great picture of the rust spores being blown away by the tractor from the infected field. This disease is very devastating. It can cause up to 100% yield loss. And here's an example. So this one is the harvest from normal healthy plants. However, as the infection goes on, you can get very shriveled grains and sometimes no yield at all. So it's not an exaggeration to call that this disease can bring a catastrophic damage to literally the crop that billions of people depend on. This disease is distributed throughout the globe, and in this map, these red areas and the black dots here are the region around the globe, at least where one significant epidemics have happened in the past. Coming back to United States, we used to have a lot of stem rust epidemics, and the most notable ones are the one that happened in 1935, 1954, and 1955, in which more than 40% of the yield loss happened because of the epidemics. And luckily, after 1970s, we did not have the major outbreak of this disease in the United States, and mainly because of two reasons. First of all, we started growing resistant varieties of wheat, and second, we eradicated the plant called Barbary, which is a sexual host, which I'll be talking later on. So because of these two reasons, we thought that stem rust is pretty much in control. However, nothing is under control forever, right? So in Uganda in 1999, a race specifically called as UG99 because it was detected in Uganda in 1999 was detected by some scientists. This UG1999 is very concerning because of three main reasons. First of all, it's rapidly evolving. It's like a flu if we compare with human disease. Each year, new strains, you can see different strains of these rays coming out. The second reason is they travel through winds, and within the 20 years of its detection in Uganda, it has traveled all over Africa, crossed Middle East, and now it is detected as far as Afghanistan and Yemen. And if this trajectory follows, it has been speculated that it will reach United States or China and India in no time, which is the breadbasket of the world. And the third reason is this pathogen, the UG99, is very aggressive. more than 80% of the world with varieties are prone to UG99 infection, and United States is not an exception. So to complicate things more, let's go into the life cycle of wheat stem rust. It has very complicated life cycle. It does not only infect the plant-like cereals like wheat or barley, it can also infect another completely unrelated host called a Barbary. And this is where the sexual reproduction happens. And this is the plant where two different strains or two different races of stem rust mate together, and all the spores that come out of this Barbary are new genetically recombined races. And it is also believed that the UG99, the deadly race, is believed to have come through the sexual reproduction occurring in this host Barbary. Now, to go more detail into what actually is Barbaries, it's a perennial shrub found across the globe. There are more than 600 species, highly diverse, and in other parts of the world they are used for different purposes. Like in Asia, they are used as a medicinal plant. In Iran, it makes a major agriculture product. They consume that on a daily basis. In America, we grow them for ornamental purpose because of this beautiful foliage they have, and also as a hedgerow crop. And one of the species that have been associated with stem rust for a long time is this common European Barbary. So it is not native to United States. It came to America with the European settlers, and it has been associated with the major epidemics that occurred in America, mainly because of two reasons. At first, this provided the early onset, the inoculum source for the early onset of disease, and second, because of the sexual reproduction happening in this plant, there were evidence that many new virulent races were coming out of this plant. So because the federal government recognized this as a culprit for the stem rust epidemics in America, they launched a greatest eradication program in the history from 1918 to 1975. And here are the few posters of many that the federal government promoted in order to educate people about the harmful of this, the common Barbary and its association with the stem rust. And during that time, more than 100 million Barbary bushes were destroyed. And in this map, each black dots you see is a one ruler property from which Barbary bushes were destroyed. Unfortunately, as the New England during that time was not the major wheat producing region, we escaped the Barbary. So these days, if we come back to New England, this European Barbary grows very commonly in our region. And another species that grows in our region is Japanese Barbary. Through the federal Barbary stem rust testing program, it was found that this species is resistant to stem rust. So the federal government promoted this species to replace this susceptible Barbary. And these days they grow in such an abundance that both of them are considered invasive species. The third species that grows in New England is hybrid. So hybrid in between these two species. At first, this was thought to be rare, created in the experimental station for the purpose of ornamental industry. However, what we found in the survey is these hybrids are prevalent throughout the New England. It's so common, it's not only in the experimental station. So these days, both of these Japanese Barbary and the hybrids are extensively used in ornamental industry. So because of this reason, we wanted to know if these hybrids are susceptible or resistant to stem rust, because their seeds are, or the plants are sold all over America and United States for ornamental purpose. So to find the status of this disease for stem rust, we did a survey over the Western Massachusetts and New England and collected all the hybrids that we could possibly get, and we did a stem rust screening. So what we found out, 50% of the plant that we screened were susceptible to stem rust, and half of them were resistant. So this raises the concern that both the hybrid and the parents, which we thought to be resistant, may play a big role in the disease cycle throughout America. And in a big picture, so as a part of my PhD project, what I'm trying to do is to find an answer to why this Japanese Barbary is resistant. And the hope is that if we can find any resistant genes on this Japanese barberry, which never gets infected by stem rust, the hope is that we can transfer this gene to wheat in sometime in future, which will make the wheat varieties stem rust resistant. And we have made a significant progress on this research, which I'll not talk in a bit. We just, our paper was just accepted a week ago, and we are working on second paper about this genetics of Barbary and for the stem rust. Now coming back to New England, why actually should we care that Barbary is present in our region? So this is a time where we are thinking of going local and growing organic, right? And as I was going through the headlines in the internet, so here are the few headlines that came up where we can see a lot of interest in growing local and organic cereal crops. And wheat is also one of those small grains that we are interested in. And one of the things that is great about this growing local, the flavor of these wheat varieties are great, but one of the things that was very concerning to me as I went through the story was I see a promotion of a lot of old varieties, the heirloom varieties, or even the varieties that came from Europe with the European settlers. And this is concerning because a lot of them are very old and most likely not immune to stem rust. And here's an example. So as we go 2 miles away from UNS, this is what we saw. So here's a big organic heirloom wheat field, and on the side you can see more than 10 plus common Barbary as a hedgerow. And on side nearby you'll also see some Barbary fields, more than 50. And it only takes one Barbary plant that can infect the small area close by, and soon this stem rust in this small field will spread to another field, and from another field to another region, resulting in the epidemics. So if we go back again to the global status, there are many hotspots of the stem rust where new virulent races have been generated, and also there has been an association with this alternate host, the sexual host Barbary, throughout the region. And especially to indicate the UG99, where the UG99 came, it's a small region like, it is not a major wheat producing region. It's like New Hampshire. However, this small region, which didn't even contribute to the global wheat, was actually acting as a kitchen to cook the devastating pathogen like UG99. So I think it's a time, as both the Barbary, different Barbaries are found in New England, it's a time to think what is the role of New Englanders, what is the role of New England in the global battle against the stem rust disease. So in conclusion, through our project, if we can find any resistant genes in Japanese Barbary that might contribute towards the larger global effect to produce the rust immune wheat varieties, and also because these 3 species of Barbary found in New England may have, may play a big role in the disease cycle, so detailed study, the epidemiological study needs to be carried out. And for those growers who are interested in growing local wheats, these old varieties of wheats need to be replaced by modern stem rust resistant varieties. And in the ornamental horticulture industry, as it's a big part of our income in America, so if we were to sell this Barbary, both the Japanese and the hybrids, going sterile may be one of the solutions to further prevent from this disease. So at the end, I would like to thank my advisor, Dr. Yago Hill. He's in Africa here doing some survey about the Barbary plants, talking with the local kids, my undergrads, postdoc, and the funding resources. Thank you. So with that, I'll accept questions. Yes.
So if the rust came to New England, do you have any feel for how long it would take to spread throughout New England?
So it really doesn't take the time. So I think if it starts, so the disease cycle is very short. It can go from not even few hours. So it can go from one plant to another, and within the season, that's how the epidemics always start, from one plant, starting a stem rust and causing epidemics in the region.
Thank you.
So apologies if you said this because I'm kind of at the edge of my hair range, but is it spread by spores, or so? I mean, if you get a field
It's a spore.
So you had a map earlier of outbreaks of rust in the US. When did rust become an important pathogen of?
In America or across the globe?
Across the globe, I guess.
So I guess it was known, this disease was known as far back as 1600, and even in Europe there was a god called Rovigali who they used to pray so that they thought he's the one who is responsible for the rust. So I think this disease,
It's been
it has been there for...
Laws on the books from Rhode Island colonies back in the 1600s about pulling barberry bushes from the
Wow.
fields. So it's been many centuries in this region, but thousands of years in Europe.
Yeah.
And Chicago is, so it's been many centuries that they've understood the connection between the Barbary and the rust.
Yeah, what's fascinating, it's been many, thousands of years where clearly having a barberry plant caused problems here, but this was before germ theory or
Yeah.
knowing anything about what's going on, but the connection is so clear that eradication was happening even without understanding that you're talking about particles and infection and agents. But it wasn't until the early 20th century until the system was really understood at the organismal level, but the association had been known for a long time.
And to add on that, so in 2011, it was only in 2011, so this Barbary is associated with another called striped rust. So we didn't know until 2011, and it was in 2011 we just found that Barbary is the culprit for the striped rust also.
You're suggesting that the resistant strains of Barbary could help develop resistant wheat strains, that using the transferring of genetic material therapy?
Right, in future if...
Yeah, I think understanding the mechanism of resistance certainly gives you insight. I don't know as if a transfer of the gene per se, but if you understood the mechanism, that might help you target looking within the wheat gene pool for similar resistance that maybe we haven't thought about yet.
Thank you again. Pete would like to mic you up so we can record you for prosperity.